Hi again, it's TR. Today I've remade the heart friendship card. A friend said that my real talking is a little more excited. So I'm going to try not to be nervous and be more real. Let me know how I do. As always, creative comments and tips are welcome. In the interest of time, and to keep the length of the video down, you can pause the video on the supplies that I have. If you are interested in something, just ask in the comments below and I will get back to you. The original card was made with pre-cut hearts. There weren't any left, so I had to use my scan and cut. I cut 4 of each heart and then glued 3 together for each one. And then heat embossed the top one while the other 3 dried some. If you heat emboss while the glue is wet, it might warp them, so I embossed just the top one and then adhered it to the previous 3, making a chipboard of sorts. I walk us through the first one and then speed up a bit for the other 2. There's a boo-boo on the first one that I will show you and how I fixed it. These WOW embossing powders came as a set with a solid base and then a chunkier one also. To get the embossing powders to stick to the project, you need to use a sticky substance. I use Versamark for this. Can I just say here that before you heat emboss, put your powder away. I had such a struggle here trying to get this embossed and not being able to point the gun to the heat mat, which is what it was created for. The mistake I made was that I used my reverse tweezers and then forgot to move them before the embossing powder started to melt where they were. And so it left a mark on the heart. I tried to apply more powder. Wrong answer. But this chunky powder is amazing. After putting more Versamark on it, I added the chunky to it. Now the chunky has some of that solid in it, but somehow the chunky floats to the top, so you have to shake it up before you put it on. A little hint here for chunky powders or even glitter powders, anything that's not regular embossing powder, don't blow your heat gun directly onto it because the heat gun blows it right off. You have to heat it from behind until it begins to melt, and it will give the chunky embossing powder or glitter something to cling to. Then you can go on top once you see that it has started to melt. check and be sure when it's melted it's shiny. Make sure there's no spots that are not shiny. Okay, see that? It kind of looks dull compared to the rest of it. That is not melted yet. But don't heat it too much. You can also overheat it. You know, if you put heat on plastic long enough, it's going to burn. Practice on a piece of scrap paper for the first few times. So now we're going to do the Aqua one, and I'm going to speed it up since I have explained how to do it already. So right about here I wanted to point out a technique that is very important. You must put out your little pinky as if you were holding a teacup. After the tweezer incident, I decided to use a piece of paper as an extension so that it wouldn't make another mark or burn my fingers. Isn't that beautiful, that aqua? Oh my goodness. And I love this gray. Just by itself, it was so beautiful. I didn't get a close-up of it, but it was so, so pretty. Once all three of the hearts were decorated, I glued them to the chipboard hearts that we had created earlier. You can see that the aqua one is just a little bit bigger. It will be the center. I don't think I showed it earlier, but once I glue these together, I have this block that I made, and I set the glued hearts underneath of it so there will be even pressure as they dry. While they are drying, we're going to focus on the sentiment. I trimmed down this piece of vellum to 1 inch by 6.5, just enough for the sentiment to fit, but also so I can fold it around the back and adhere it with my ATG gun. Adhesives or glue will show through vellum. There are other ways we can talk about later, but for now I will just use my glue runner. I should have stamped this before I cut it down. This Stamp-A-Majig, which is a Stampin' Up! Product, would have been easier to use if I had been using a bigger piece of paper. But waste not, want not, I went ahead and used it. The Friendship stamp is a Stampin' Up! Also. It's old, so I'm not sure if it's still available, but boy, do I use it a lot. I used VersaFine ink. I really like the clean, crisp print that it always gives me, but it is a pigment ink and takes a while to dry, even after I hit it with the heat gun several times. To check to see if it is dry, you can put a piece of scrap paper gently over it, being sure not to smudge it. Press lightly and then lift straight up. You might have to do this several times. Of course, vellum is also a plastic and not porous, so it didn't absorb any of the ink at all. I just had to rely on my heat gun to dry it. Okay, everything is ready to assemble. I used an A2 card base, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. Then the tan cardstock is cut at 4 by 5 1/4. So when it's placed on the card base, it will show just like a scant around the edge of white. After deciding where to place the hearts, I noticed that some of the white was showing, so I grabbed a pair of scissors and carefully trimmed it off, being conscious not to cut the embossed piece. Now those two outside hearts, the tan and the gray, are a tiny bit thicker because of the 4 layers of cardstock. So just on the top of the aqua heart on the back, I'm going to put a layer of foam so that it sits flush with the others. Now don't ask me what kind of foam tape that is in the comments, because it's terrible foam tape. I don't like it, and I'm just using it up because, again, waste not, want not. I don't want to feel like I wasted my money, which I did. Now we can put the sentiment strip on. I did score the vellum at a 1/2 inch from each side and applied the tape runner to the ends to fold back. Be careful when you score vellum or even fold it and rub it with your finger, because it will tear. You will remember I said this the first time it happens to you. Now, here's another mistake. I should have waited to apply the bling until last, but I didn't. I was just careful when I glued it onto the base, which I don't have footage of, but it does show the card at the end on the A2 card base. So if you enjoyed this, please leave a thumbs up, and like last time, leave a comment to have a chance to receive this card. Thank you, and come again.